I want to thank you, Sheriff Villanueva, for joining us today. Your attendance is an important step in furthering the level of transparency between the Sheriff's Department and the community. So we will begin by discussing item 2D, secret deputy subgroups. I understand that you, Assistant Sheriff Chase, is present, and that you had indicated that Chief Burson would be here available. I don't see him as yet. But I want to be very clear in our appreciation of your being here that we are primarily interested in your discussion of your policy and your leadership of the department in the area of secret deputy subgroups. So with that, you have the floor, and we will have additional questions as we proceed. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I appreciate the invitation. And I think in this type of a setting is the most productive use of all of our time. And I can reiterate probably what has already been made public, and the fact that this issue of the deputy subgroups or cliques, something dates back to the 1970s, is not unique to the Sheriff's Department, not unique to law enforcement or any type of paramilitary organization for that matter. And I think that is well known to everyone. I also know that the history of the department dates back to the 70s again with the group called the Vikings, and then the Red Devils at East LA, going all the way up to the present day. And previous sheriffs have been remiss in their duty to somehow address it or do something about the issue when it arose to a level of concern that impacted either the community or the organization. And my administration, we've taken an entirely different approach. One, we acknowledged the problem from the very beginning. In fact, we inherited a problem at the very beginning, which was the Kennedy Hall fight back in, I believe, September of 2018, before I was elected as sheriff. We took the appropriate steps to investigate it criminally. We investigated it administratively. In fact, we provided to the OIG both investigations, and the administrative one alone was over 3,000 pages in length. Very detailed, interviewed over 70 individuals. And something that is going to be an ask of me to your organization is that when we deliver these products, we need feedback. We need to, one, acknowledge that you received it, acknowledge, hey, did it work? Did it not work? Did it achieve the goals that we were looking for in terms of transparency and accountability? Because that is the best way that we as an organization can improve. Because I think oversight and the role of the Inspector General is it's a valid one for any law enforcement organization in the 21st century. However, it has to be functional. It has to work. So when we do something, we generate a product, we need a product in return. We need a critique of the product. We need to, for example, if you exist to analyze their programs, practices, policies, procedures, what they are, let us know. Get us the feedback on there. Because right now, I'm concerned about the fact that there was a product from the OIG about secret societies, and then that was I'm somehow maintaining a secrecy, and that was what was reported to the press. When in actuality, we did everything we could do legally on the criminal side of the investigation and on the administrative side. We held a press conference in August. We announced the results of this. As a result of that investigation, we suspended 22 employees, suspended their pay. We also ended up terminating 4 employees, one who had resigned during the time of the termination. So that was a total of 26 people that were impacted. We transferred 36 employees. The entire leadership team of East LA Station was transferred, and they were transferred unwillingly. I know some are characterizing, well, it was voluntary, this or that. Bottom line, they were transferred. And the ones that were the decision makers were transferred. In fact, my very first act in office was to remove the captain of East LA Station because I had lost confidence in the ability to lead the organization. That is accountability. Suspending employees when they cross the line, engage in misconduct that harms other employees, harms members of the community as a result of they call them something or whatever it is that is misconduct, we hold people accountable and we take action according to the rule of law. Now, we have a more recent event now in Compton that is currently under investigation that I can't comment on the details on it. However, the result, once we're done, it'll be provided to the Inspector General, who hopefully will actually provide some input into the quality and nature of the investigation and did it achieve its goals of holding people accountable. We have a new policy that was created and put in effect in February of this year. However, we cannot apply that policy retroactively, as some have suggested. That is against the law, right? Because regardless of people's desires or political agendas, we're still bound by the First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. And with that in mind, that brings us to where we are today. We have issues about, the policy is detailed. It's something that was never done before in the history of the department. We addressed it because a lot of other sheriffs kind of just shied away from it because of concerns. How do we address it? How do we meet the First Amendment concerns and union considerations? We found the right wording, and the policy is currently in place, is being implemented. When we do now interviews, we actually ask those questions. Before they were never asked, they're being asked now. So that is called progress. And it's very important because we want to hold our employees accountable. We want to make sure they're a representative of not just the profession, but of the community that they're serving. So there's a lot that's going on with that. And these are all positive events. And when we hold people accountable and we are transparent about it, we also need to have the Oversight Commission acknowledge that and make that public, let it be known. Because if the only message that comes out to the public is, oh my God, he's not transparent. Oh my God, he's not accountable. When we're actually doing all the hard work, that's it's a disservice. The Kennedy Hall investigation happened during the middle of the pandemic. It took about 6 months. There were thousands of hours devoted to interviewing people. We had all the concerns with getting people on quarantine, not in quarantine, attorneys who, were not willing to accommodate. The whole issue it was not an easy job to do. It took a lot of work. My hat's off to all those people. They really rolled up their sleeves. And the product, it needs to be picked apart. It needs to be analyzed, and let's see what the results are. But that's what we've done so far with it, and I think we've communicated that message throughout the department. We've briefed it. We briefed it at the executive level, at the management level. We pushed it out and station briefings, and it's taken hold. It's working. All right. So with that, any questions you may have, please. Okay.
This is Rob Bonner, Sheriff. Let me just join with Chair Rubin and thank you for being with us today. And I also want to start by acknowledging and applauding you, sir, for being the first sheriff of Los Angeles County to adopt a policy prohibiting Sheriff's Department personnel from participating in or joining deputy cliques. I'm referring, of course, to, as you referred to the policy, it's the Manual of Policy and Procedures, Section 3-01/050.83, which was adopted by the Sheriff's Department last February, about 10 months ago. So you're to be applauded and commended on that, and I want to make that very clear at the outset. I do have a few questions, though, I want to put to you, and in my limited time. But first of all, I think you would agree, just based upon what you said about the Vikings and history, that historically there have been deputy cliques within the Sheriff's Department. Am I correct that historically that has been the case? Correct?
That has been the case, yes.
And would you agree, and I'm not asking for how many or where, but would you agree that currently there are still deputy cliques in one or more of the patrol stations of the Sheriff's Department?
I'd say that'd be a fair assessment.
No. The question is, and again, without naming names, I'm not looking for names of any deputies here, but have any deputies, any department employees been disciplined for participating in or joining or soliciting other deputies to participate in a deputy clique? Have there been any deputies disciplined for essentially participating in deputy cliques?
Well, as you're familiar with, the policy was introduced and it was in place in February. It was vetted. It took a while to get there, but it became effective in February. So the investigations that we have currently moved from that point forward, from February forward, that policy is in effect. And we are doing it. The investigations that we have ongoing, I can't go into any specific detail, but the policy is being enforced, to answer your question. And that's very important.
Yeah, I know it is important, and it's important. I think you're saying that, first of all, that at least from February forward, and I agree with you, I don't think this is retroactive, but February of this year forward, that it would violate your policy, the 050.83, would violate policy for a deputy to continue to participate or join in or solicit others to join in a deputy clique. Am I correct? That would violate this policy.
It has to be linked to misconduct, however, because if it's just, say a group, let's say a fictitious group, they decide to get a tattoo of a Tweety bird on their shoulder, and they're the Tweety birds. And you have a group of people with a Tweety bird. Just that in of itself, we cannot take action on it because it has to be tied to some type of misconduct that harms somebody. The grouping of itself, it does not going to pass constitutional muster on the First Amendment grounds. However, once we get into misconduct, that gives us that window of opportunity to then go there. But we have to cross that bridge.
Let me say I'm going to respectfully disagree that there's a First Amendment or constitutional right by a deputy sheriff to participate in a deputy clique. I mean, but that's a legal issue. Let's put it aside for a moment. What I want to clarify is, and I have your policy in front of me, it says that department personnel shall not participate or join in any group. And it goes on to say, herein referred to as deputy cliques, which often include an associated symbol and or tattoo. This policy, it seems to me, is pretty straightforward. It doesn't require additional misconduct. If a deputy sheriff now, today, solicits another deputy to join a clique, the executioners, the banditos, you name the clique, that seems to violate your policy without any further misconduct. But you're telling me that that does not violate your policy. So I just want to be clear. If somebody right now, a deputy, is soliciting another person to join a deputy clique that's associated with an identifiable tattoo, let's say, are you telling me that that does not violate 050.83, or does it violate it? I would hope it does, because I've read it. It seems like it would be a violation of your policy.
That calls for a legal opinion, and I'm going to defer to Chief Burson on that. However, from my own perspective, and again, I'm not a lawyer. In fact, most of you are the ones who are the lawyers. We have to get to that point, though. I can't start blanket. How do we get to that point where person A convinced person B to join a group? How do we get to that point? And that is very important now, because I agree with you that at face value, when we're doing an investigation regarding misconduct and it's discovered pursuant to the investigation that A, B, and C joined this group, okay, now we have grounds and that we can apply the policy. However, how do you get to that point is a very important.
I agree. It's very important. And how you get to that point is called an investigation. But so let me go back to my question, because I just want to see if I can get a clear answer. And that is, without naming any names, has any department employee been disciplined for joining or soliciting a deputy clique since your policy went into effect in February of this year?
I can say that not yet. However, I'll leave the details of that with the chief person.
All right. So, to your knowledge, no one has been disciplined yet. Let me ask you something different. And again, without naming names, but has any deputy sheriff been, well, let me put it this way, without naming names, have any investigations been opened by the Internal Affairs Bureau or any other unit of the Sheriff's Department to investigate whether, since the policy went in effect, a deputy has joined or solicited another deputy to join a deputy clique?
I'm going to have Chief Burson answer that question because he has more detail than I do on that.
Before we get to hearing from Chief Burson, I want to be very clear, Sheriff, that you indicated that it is your position that you cannot discipline unless it is tied to some kind of misconduct. And as Commissioner Bonner has so carefully pointed out, that it does not seem to be spelled out in the same manner in your policy. So the question is how you could ever tie misconduct to participation in a deputy subgroup, deputy clique, that would in fact violate your policy.
Here's what I can say is that when we're aware of an allegation, we take action, we investigate it. And as a result of that, we get to all the points that Mr. Bonner wants to go to, and we will be doing that. All right. Obviously, investigations take time, and we're here since February, so we're about 10 months into it. And I'll have Chief Burson speak to specifics on investigations. But this actual policy section and the questions of the investigators is now covering that policy. So that's something you should be aware of. But my idea is that, one, in today's litigious society, just the mere existence of any symbolizing, identifying group in this type of a profession can be problematic. And so we're obviously doing everything we can to discourage it and eliminate it. However, we can't eliminate people. It's going to take time. So let's just say that I'll leave it to Chief Burson to go into details on that.
Yeah, let me just make the request. I don't want to take time up right now, but for Chief Burson, if you're willing to do so, to identify or let us know whether there are any investigations just of violating the policy of 050.83. That is to say, continuing to participate or joining or soliciting someone to join a clique since February of 2002 without any other misconduct. They're either zero or they're a number, and we'd like to have that number. But let me go on to the next question. I'll assume we'll get a response to that from Chief Burson in due course. Aside from publishing the policy, Sheriff, have you personally made it clear to department personnel that the days of deputy cliques are over? And do you intend to do so if you haven't?
Yes, we have done that already. Right. We have had that on briefing at the executive level at EPC. We're doing it at the station level. We're communicating. My commanders are going out there in the field, talking to the patrol deputies. And we've made this very, very clear that those days are behind us. And obviously we're looking for a brighter future because as we know, the problems that have existed in the past with these deputy cliques, and the ones that have made the most press involve deputies getting drunk, getting together, and a fight involves. And if you look at the majority of them, that is what it has been. That's just true for the Quiet Cannon incident back in, I think, 2010 or so. It was true of the Kennedy Hall thing. It was true of the Compton thing. All these things are people getting into fights and is actually internal, not external to the community. I think the only one that had any nexus externally was the issue in the jails back in 2008, 2009, and the Vikings back in 1980s through 1990. And so what we're looking at now is behavior, people just treating each other with dignity and with respect.
Well, let me put it this way. That's good to hear. Have you personally made it clear that by joining a deputy clique or soliciting somebody else to join an existing one, that violates the sheriff's policy, that violates your policy 050.83. Have you personally made that clear that this violates at least the written policy that you put out?
We have made that clear, but you give me an idea though to make it more abundantly clear. I think we're gonna have to do a video that really lays it out in detail and the consequences. It might be more for someone who's just not getting the memo. And trust me, we've repeated this again and again ad nauseum. But we would do this on a briefing, and we'll provide a video briefing. In fact, we'll give you a copy of that video so you can see it for yourself.
And this is something. Is this video something you've already done and required to be played at musters?
This is something we're going to do.
Okay, you plan to do this.
And abundance of caution, yes. And we'll give you a copy of the video. Okay,
I think that's an excellent idea, and would very much like to see a video that puts this message out strongly and clearly to the to department personnel.
In fact, Mr. Bonner, we'll use some of the clips of the people who put comments on your oversight commission as a part of the video. It's very informative.
One of the reasons that I'm concerned, particularly of getting this message out strongly and clearly, and only you can do this, really, Sheriff, at the end of the day, is that, the Oversight Committee has been provided with information that just within the last 2 weeks, 3 deputies in the East LA station were inked. That is to say, they became new members of the Bandidos. This would violate policy, wouldn't it, for somebody to join the Bandidos clique at this point?
Okay.
Correct.
Well, the policy requires the department to ID deputies or encouraging others to join and violate the policy or the law. So we definitely have that in place. And if you have information on that, please give it to us so we can do a proper assessment of that.
And we'll provide the information that we have on that subject. I'm wondering, Chair Rubin, I know we have limited time here, but I'm also interested in, it sounds to me, Sheriff, that you do view it as a good thing if the department moved and you became the first sheriff, really, to eradicate deputy cliques. That would be a good thing, would it not, sir?
Anything that gets the department to work better with the community and creates more trust instead of losing trust is always going to be a good thing, yes.
Yeah. Would you agree that at least historically deputy cliques have certainly have the potential now to increase the risk of civil liability to the department and to the county?
Yes, they do, and we see it numerically, and it's almost a cottage industry now to sue law enforcement. So giving more ammunition is not in the best interest of the organization or the taxpayer.
So, and would you agree that, based upon what you know, the deputy cliques have been resistant to supervision by their supervisors, their sergeants, and their higher ups?
Well, I'm not going to answer a hypothetical like that, but I can tell you from my own personal experience. I worked patrol in East LA in the 1990s. You still had, and those days were the Red Devils are from the 70s, and then from the 80s and 90s, you had the cavemen. That was the tattoo. They weren't called Red Devils or cavemen. They were just East LA deputies. Some people had that tattoo. Other people didn't have the tattoo. There were good deputies and not so good deputies on both camps. You couldn't make a division. Oh, hey, this group that has a tattoo, they're a bunch of, a-holes. And this other group without tattoos are real nice guys. There was not any distinction like that because I worked with both, and overwhelming majority of both crowds were honorable, hardworking people, and they were from the community. A lot of them from East LA in particular. So to make a blanket assessment like that is really not true to the history of these cliques or tattoos in the department. I think there's too much given to them in terms of the actual, because I lived through that period of time where we had them present. I actually witnessed it with my own 2 eyes, and I was never treated any different because I was not a member of one of these groups.
So you've never been a member of a deputy clique yourself?
No.
Correct?
Commissioner Bonner, I'd like at this point, because we have time constraints, to give some additional questions to some other commissioners. If you could wrap up.
I just wanted to get an answer to that last question. I think you said no, but I didn't quite hear an answer, Sheriff. Have you ever been a member of a deputy clique yourself?
No, never.
And one last thing, and that is the report of the Citizens Commission on Jail Violence made two findings. One is that deputy cliques have contributed to the use of excessive force within the sheriff's department. Are you familiar with the finding, the report of the CCJV?
Yes, I was. And when the recommendations came out, I was a watch commander at CRDF in a jail facility, and we worked hard. This is 2011, 2012, 2013.
Yep.
And every year we brought down use of force by 50%. So it was a lot of very good recommendations came out of that report. And a lot of it was just we were paying attention now to the use of force and proper supervision, the role of supervision, and having people on the floor actually monitoring what deputies were doing in a jail environment. So a lot of good recommendations came out of that. And as a result of that, by 2013, it really was a way different environment from 2008. So they worked.
Yeah, I agree at work, and I believe the deputy cliques that were in the jail have been essentially eradicated, the 3,000 boys and 2,000 boys. But yes, my point is that the finding was that deputy cliques, not just in the jails, but in patrol as well, contribute to the use of excessive force. But let me just end with this question, and that is the CCJV, of course, I was a member of that commission, also found that deputy cliques are more resistant to supervision, to supervisory oversight. That was a finding of the CCJV after studying this issue for about a year. Do you disagree with that finding?
I'd say it's an inference is drawn from the study, which was focused on the jails, and you drew that parallel. Okay, well, if this is patrol, I think unless you did the exact same study in patrol and had data to support it, you can make that allegation. But having worked in the environment, I did not see it myself. And the RAND study will be one tool that will actually provide some of that feedback.
I yield my time, Madam Chair, to other commissioners.
Commissioner Giggins, you've been waiting patiently. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Sheriff, for being here and participating in this conversation. You did mention that you do ask questions during interviews. I believe you're alluding to questions around deputy cliques. Could you elaborate a little bit about that? What kind of interviews? Is it with new employees? Is it supervisorial evaluations? How do these questions come up? Under what context?
The only context that type of question comes up in when we're doing an actual investigation. And that I'll defer to Chief Burson to give you the details on that. But it is definitely a question that is being asked now that was never asked before. Okay. And then,
I have a comment. You mentioned that it would be good for the COC to get behind your policies and help the community understand them, broadcast when you have a policy. So my comment is we've part of one of the ways that we thought it would be good to collaborate is if the COC had a preview and had a little bit of an input into the policy before it was completely officially adopted. So I just wanted to make that as a comment because I think that we would like to be able to support policies that make sense and that are helpful to the community and help to get the messages out to the community. So I just wanted to make that comment. If we could be brought in a little bit earlier when you do have a policy, I think it'll just help the collaboration all the way around.
Actually, I agree with that position. And I want to say with the implementation of SB 54, when it first took office, we actually did meet. Matter of fact, April 22nd, you had an immigration ad hoc committee, and we met along with ACLU and other people. And As a result of that, where we're at today, where we have a total moratorium on transfers to ICE, we rejected SCAP grant funds. Our starting point was SB 54, and we're now in a position today where we're in a very, very good position in terms of that. And you actually participated in it.
It's a good model.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners have any questions on this subject before we move on? Yes, Commissioner Harris.
I always like to hear from Chief Burson. He's been asked a couple of questions now, and we still haven't heard any answers to those. So I'd like to hear what he has to say.
Before we hear from Chief Burson, I'd like to see if there are any additional questions of the sheriff. Commissioner Ochen, did you have any additional questions for the sheriff at this point?
Yes. Sheriff Villanueva, thanks for being here. You've been missed over these last many months. I do have some questions about to pick up on Commissioner Bonner, his thread of questions about the environment. How are members of the Sheriff's Department able to raise concerns about deputy clicks and their colleagues' participation in deputy clicks?
Well, one thing is they need to communicate their experience with their supervisor. We have, even before we had the policy on the clicks, we have a very strong policy on hazing and retaliation. And we need to have the employee at least communicate that information to their immediate supervisor. The supervisor has an obligation to report any bullying, hazing, sexual harassment of any kind. They have an affirmative duty to report that to their boss, the unit commander, and they have to document it in writing. And that forms the basis of it. We have a policy, entire policy of equality, which is very elaborate, and it allows for anonymous complaints. I mean, we have so many different ways that someone can step up and say, hey, I was harmed. We'll take complaints, and they're deferred to us from the FEA, the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, from EEOC. We take them from the public, the Watch Commander Service comment reports. Any complaint that we get, we're going to address it, and we have a legal obligation to address these complaints.
Thank you. And I'm turning off my video because I'm having some bandwidth issues. So it's not to be disrespectful. I just want to make sure that I can continue to participate. So I wonder about that process of complaining to a supervisor. I'm wondering if that may chill the willingness of deputies to come forward if there is some concern that the supervisor may not take their complaint seriously, or that there may be some retaliation. Do you have any concerns about that process and the way in which it may incentivize or de-incentivize deputies from coming forward to complain about gangs in substations?
Well, we have to know about the problem in order to do something about it. And we do have a very clearly defined chain of command. We have the anonymous link on our website, LSD.org, so you can complain outside of it. We also have outside the agency, and we have that retaliation policy. So a lot of these things work together to give us the strength to know we have a very aggressive outreach program. And the fact that people are making anonymous complaints, it tells us the system is working. And in some places we get the complaints, we take them from third parties. There's a conflict between A and B, and then C says, hey, I saw A and B fighting, or A says something to B and C reports it. We take those third party complaints as well, and we investigate them. And we have the equity panel that's going to review the complaints if it has to do with anything with Title VII, for example. So it's unless you can come up with a new way to get people to admit something, we're definitely taking an aggressive action when we have the complaint. We also have the unions themselves involved in these complaints.
Have you asked all sworn personnel of the Sheriff's Department to affirm that they are not currently members of a deputy gang or subgroup?
We have a First Amendment and the Fourth Amendment would tell me very loudly, and so would County Council, that would not be a good idea.
Again, I don't know that I would agree with that, but has County Council given you a written opinion that would be unconstitutional?
That's cause for legal opinion. I'm going to defer to County Council.
No, I'm not asking for a legal opinion. I'm simply asking, have you asked for a legal opinion?
Yes, the prior administration actually has asked for that legal opinion, and it was asked in 2014. And the results of that opinion from County Council was exactly that it would violate both First and Fourth Amendment considerations.
Would you be comfortable sharing that memorandum or opinion with the commission?
I believe there's County Council monitoring this. Yeah, I want to have them please share it with the Oversight Commission.
Thank you. And Sheriff Villanueva, you mentioned that you were aware of the existence of deputy gangs when you were a member when you were a deputy or a lieutenant. And you mentioned there were sort of
I'm not gonna use the terminology deputy gang. And when I worked at patrol in East LA, I can tell you there were no deputy gangs there.
Okay, but you were familiar with, however you want to place subgroups, you were familiar that they exist, you were aware that they existed, and you were aware that individuals were participating in them. Is that right?
Yes.
Are any of those people whom you worked with still employed by the Sheriff's Department, whom you were aware were members of these subgroups, which I refer to as gangs?
That's a very, very big question. And I don't think I have enough information to answer it one way or another.
You don't know who you knew that was a member of a subgroup? And whether they're still employed with the Sheriff's Department?
When I was at East LA Station in the 1990s, we have roughly, I think, 200 sworn roughly at East LA, plus about 50 civilians, 250 people. How many had a tattoo of a caveman or red devil? I have no idea, nor did I ever care to answer or care to ask that question. And of that crowd that is now present today, you can understand now that you're talking about an unknown from 20 years ago. Fast forward to today, how many of the unknown do I know? And there's no answer to that.
Okay.
Commissioner Chen, I want to give a few other commissioners an opportunity. So if you have
let me ask this last question. Sheriff Villanueva, are you willing to come back again voluntarily so we can have more time to discuss these pressing issues?
Well, if as long as you folks give me some advance notice and we can put it on the calendar, by all means, just let me know what you want to talk about so I can have enough information or bring the person most knowledgeable, to have the information. Otherwise, it won't help. But by all means.
Wonderful. Yeah, then I'll yield the balance of.
First, Commissioner Kennedy, and then Commissioner Harris.
Thank you very much, Sheriff Villanueva, for engaging with us on this important issue. On the LASD website, there is something called an LASD tattoo image form that provides for uploading photos of one's tattoos, and it's followed by a request for a description and meaning of the tattoo. Who in the organization is asked to fill out the LASD tattoo image form?
This is in background. This is pre-employment. And obviously, when we hire somebody, we have the ability to ask a lot of questions that you can't ask someone who is currently an employee. And the people who are being hired, we have to screen them for gang affiliation, maybe some racist ideology. And we ask them to submit their tattoos they have on their body. When they go through the medical, in the medical review process, they also document the tattoos. The background investigator matches the two to see if something is, he declared that he omitted, and then the medical people catch it, and that forms the basis for disqualifying an applicant.
So, Sheriff, is it your position that you can ask private citizens whether they have a gang tattoo without running afoul of the First Amendment but you cannot ask existing government employees the same question.
Well, you're calling for a legal opinion. That's a very loaded legal opinion. And I think you have to appreciate that when you're applying for a job, your privacy rights are decidedly lower than when you're an incumbent employee. And that's, I think, well established in law.
I think it's just the opposite, Sheriff. The Supreme Court of the United States has said when a citizen enters government service, the citizen necessarily must accept certain limitations on his or her freedom. So First Amendment protections for government employees, particularly law enforcement officers, are actually lower because of the mission that law enforcement officers provide in our society. So I was just wondering if there's some reason that the LASD tattoo image form couldn't be given to existing deputies so that we could find out the universe of clique or gang members and then engage in the high quality research about whether or not there's a correlation or a causation between being involved in a deputy clique or gang and escalating use of force and other misconduct.
You're asking a lot of loaded questions, and I understand you're a professor at a law school, if I'm not correct.
Yes.
And I think our county council, our Department of Human Resources has vetted everything for constitutionality and permissibility. We conform to all state and federal laws in terms of employment. And if you wish to change them or challenge them in some way, you definitely have the right to do so, but it won't be through me.
I appreciate it, Sheriff. I don't have anything else.
Commissioner Harris.
Well, just quickly, my question is pretty granular, and I'm just curious. You mentioned that 4 people were discharged behind the Kennedy Hall investigation, and I'm just curious if one of those that was discharged was the sergeant that was identified not by name but by rank as being in the investigation of Kennedy Hall. Were they either discharged, demoted in rank, or have they resigned, or nothing's happened to them?
There was 4 that was discharged. One of them retired prior to the discipline being imposed, so I guess they left in lieu of.
Okay, was one of those 4 the sergeant that was identified in the internal criminal investigation as being one of the primary subjects of that investigation?
I'll leave that to Chief Burson. However, I think based on POBAR, I don't want to go into the details of identifying an individual and discipline.
We're not looking for an individual identification, just merely a rank.
Well, that in and of itself would be problematic. I'll have Chief Burson answer that question.
At this point, I'd like to hear from Chief Burson, who's been waiting patiently.
I'd like to hear from him too. I'm waiting too.
Yes, please go ahead, sir. I think you're muted, Chief Burson.
Chief Burson, it appears that you're connected through 2 different ways. If you're also connected via telephone, try to unmute yourself through the telephone as well. Nobody.
Madam Chair, while we're waiting for Chief Burson to come online, can I ask a follow-up question to Sheriff Villanueva?
Sure, go ahead.
Sheriff Villanueva, if County Council changed its position or its legal advice to you about the permissibility of asking current deputies about any subgroup or gang affiliations, would you ask that question to all of your sworn personnel?
That's a tough question. That's something I'd have to consult with internal affairs, and also becomes a question of the impact to the organization as a whole. If we start becoming inquisition without any basis of misconduct that launches it, that is somewhat problematic for any organization. You know, just an example, if you were, I don't know, the Postal Service, and they start quizzing every one of their employees, do you have a weapon? It would be kind of odd, and it would probably result in its own impact to the organization without that basis to launch it from a misconduct investigation.
But if it related to their job, for example, wouldn't it be appropriate for the post office to
It
ask
does
a
appear
pertinent
that we are
question
hearing someone else.
of all of their employees? If there was a pattern and practice of some kind of misconduct that associated with a particular group, wouldn't it be appropriate to ask whether an individual is a member of such a group as part of the continuing, as part of a condition of them continuing their employment?
Well, that would constitute an impermissible search of an entire organization, and that itself raises, from an employment perspective, legal perspective, that would raise a lot of concerns. You cast such a wide net, and what is a compelling government interest in determining that without any evidence of misconduct just on its face? That's a question I'm going to defer to our county council, but I believe Chief Burson just popped up there. Did I lose him?
Yeah. He's here.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'll wait for Chief Burson. Thank you.
Chief Burson, I think we now can see you and you're connected, so please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I'm actually on Bruce Chase. So I am Matt Burson. I am not Bruce Chase, first and foremost. And just currently, I would like this commission to know that we are conducting a comprehensive investigation in the city of Compton now with the allegations of the executioners. And currently, we have over 2,000 pages of documentation of various interviews that we've done with literally everyone in that station. So again, I can't get to the specifics of what we've uncovered until the investigation has concluded. But again, as I spoke of in August, we take this very seriously, and I promised to take a holistic look at any of these alleged subgroups and cliques throughout the department. And Compton, obviously, that was on our radar. And we are going forward, again, starting with Compton and East LA and all the other stations where we hear of these allegations. So, and currently,
Chief Burson, what other?
We've conducted over 129 interviews at this point.
Chief Burson, what other stations are you also looking at?
Again, I'm looking departmentally. I'm looking all over the place. Right now, our central focus is in Compton right now. I don't want to start various investigations all over the department unless we hear of allegations of abuse, harassment, or any of these other complaints that we've heard that were specifically geared to Compton.
If I could just ask, yes, I believe the sheriff punted this to you, and that is, without naming names, are there any investigations that have been opened by IAB or the sheriff's department for, I'm not talking about other misconduct, but investigations for joining or soliciting another deputy to join a deputy clique or participating in a deputy clique since the policy 050.83 was adopted? Are there any such investigations? Not asking for names. Can you answer that, yes or no?
Well, currently we're in the inquiry stage right now that we're actually looking, again, holistically throughout the department. So to answer your question, we're just in the inquiry stage, again, looking at all sorts of misconduct to see if it addresses this specific policy.
Well, but we were making this distinction about misconduct, but the policy 050.83 states failure to adhere to this policy may subject violators to discipline. So again, the sheriff addressed this in a way, but this policy seems to say that if you violate the policy, and the policy is that department personnel shall not participate or join any group, and it defines then deputy cliques and subgroups. So my question is, if that's a violation, isn't that a violation of the policy? And if so, are there any investigations for just violating the policy?
No, the policy is going to have to be associated with misconduct. Okay. And again, we're in a large inquiry stage right now. So we don't know what we're uncovering various things right now. So at some point, will we reach that point? I don't know, but we have to continue to do our inquiry.
I'm sorry, though.
Uncover what we can.
I'm sorry, you're never going to get rid of deputy cliques in the sheriff's department. You're never going to be able to do this unless you have a policy that says you cannot join or participate in deputy cliques, and you are going to be subject to discipline. And if you're telling me that this policy does not cover that, then this policy is inadequate. You will not be able to get rid of deputy cliques, which I believe is the sheriff's objective. So you need to rewrite this policy and make it clearer than it is.
Well, also, sir, we're going to have to identify those people involved in these cliques.
No, you don't. You don't even have.
So
you don't have to identify.
That's going to be a daunting task in itself.
Yeah, let me just say this. You really don't. Leadership, and I'm talking to the sheriff now, it's really not about investigating everybody. It's making clear that this is the policy. You can be disciplined for violating the policy, and you will, and if you have leadership on this, sheriff, you can make it clear that the days of cliques are over, because most of your personnel will not want to violate a policy that you promulgated. So it's really deterrence. It's not about investigating everybody that's out there. It's a matter of making the message clear. And I think your deputies will actually get the message that it's no longer tolerated to participate in a deputy clique. And if this policy doesn't cover that, then you need to rewrite this policy and make sure that it's clear.
Well, the deputies already know it's clear, sir. You can believe that. A lot of deputies don't condone this sort of behavior, and we know that. And you got to give this sheriff credit, because this is something that's never been done in the past, because everybody has passed the buck, and the buck stops with us right now, and we're going to do something about it.
All right. I'm as chair, I'm looking at the time. It's now 10 minutes to 1. And it is clear to me, and I'm sure to other commissioners, that there are many more discussions that we need to have with the sheriff and hopefully with you, Chief Burson, on the subject of the sheriff's policy and changes that are being made. I certainly welcome the sheriff's suggestion about creating a video that will be dispersed among the department. But at this point in time, there is no way this afternoon that we are going to get to the second subject, which everybody has been patiently waiting
Hey,
for.
ma'am, I'm sorry, ma'am. Can I say one thing real quick?
All right, but just
Yeah, we do have an ad hoc meeting that we have for subgroups that we've only met in August, and I am open every month or every week to have that particular meeting where we could have answered a lot of these questions rather than wait till today and try to iron this out.
well, thank you for that, Chief Burson. I know that and would welcome your participation on that as well. So, but my point at this hour is that it is clear that we have many more discussions that we would welcome with the sheriff on this subject, and we'll be open to continuing this discussion with the sheriff at a time and place of his choosing. The next commission meeting is January 21st. I don't know if that would be a good date for you or not, but if it is not, if you could check your calendar and advise us, we will convene a special meeting to continue this discussion. We also, I think it is essential that we have a discussion on your policies and leadership on COVID-19 in the jail. It is clear because of the hour that we are simply not going to get to that today. And I would hope that you will return to begin that discussion with us as well, particularly in this climate with tremendous surge of the virus in LA County, the increase in the jail population, which I understand is not due to anything that you have done. But there are many more discussions that we would welcome with you. And as I said at the outset, we are pleased that you had agreed to join us today and hope that this is not just a one-time affair, because it is. We gain much from your presence, and look forward to your returning at another point in time. Now, before we move to public comment on this issue and general public comment that will be combined, Patricia, Commissioner Ochen, do you have a brief question or comment at this point?
Yeah, I just want to clarify something because which was a conversation that was happening between Commissioner Bonner and the sheriff as well as Chief Burson. So I just want to be clear: you do not consider membership in a subgroup or gang itself to be misconduct.
I would say, you see that it's all about definition. And I think when we stay away from trying to corral or pigeonhole people in certain categories, we're going to be fine. But once we try to do that, we still run into the argument of how do you know what you know, and did you achieve that legally? And that's very important because of the employer-employee relationship.
No, well, I guess I'm asking a different question, because you said that the only time there will be discipline for membership in a subgroup is when it's attached to some misconduct. Okay, I think that's what I heard. First. Second of all, there is a policy that prohibits membership in deputy subgroups. So my question is the violation of that policy, because someone is a member of a deputy subgroup, misconduct? Is violation of that policy by itself, without anything more, misconduct?
If we have someone we identified who is encouraging others to violate the policy, to join a group, get a tattoo of one of these groups, that would be a violation of policy, and we can address that through investigation. However, I'm inheriting from December 3rd of 2018, I inherited an entire department of 18,000 employees. I may have people who got a tattoo 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. I can't say, aha, voila, you got a tattoo, you're fired. That is just not legally permissible in no way, shape, or form. It would just, cause the department to just lock up, and no one's going to do anything. But let's focus on misconduct behavior that we can investigate properly from February 14th forward, and then we can hold people accountable. We're going to provide the video. We're going to produce it, and we'll have you guys get a copy of the video so you can see exactly. So for Mr. Bonner, you'll have no doubt whatsoever my communication to the employees, because I think you want to see that, and I think that's a very good idea. I like that.
So
but in closing, I'm running out of time, ma'am.
Sure.
In closing, I just want to say that I want to have I know the county ordinance doesn't provide for a memorandum of agreement. However, I think one is sorely needed in terms of the material that's provided to the OIG and to your commission. I think that would resolve a lot of issues, because my commitment since the campaign says, I want to give you everything you're legally authorized to get. The only thing you can't is things that have a confidentiality set by state law. It's an active criminal or administrative investigation that by releasing it, obviously going to harm it. That's it. The rest of it, knock yourself out. And we want to get to that point. It's not cheap, because a lot of transparency comes at great expense, but we're working our way through that. By the end of this month, we achieved 100% compliance on PRA requests pursuant to SB 1421. Very important. And last but not least, I think when we work together, we achieve a lot. But remember, you told me you did a resolution a month ago. You're calling for my resignation. That does not really help in terms of goodwill and moving forward, working together. So I want to thank you for the invitation, for giving me the opportunity, and to have my person most knowledgeable here. I had both from the COVID and from the deputy subgroups. And the next time we speak, I'll make sure we'll have whoever is the person most knowledgeable that's of your interest. We'll make sure they're here as well, so you can be informed and do your job. Right. So thank you all.
Thank you for being here, and